of all, whereby that this is a committee where the members next to me will hear all of the representations, positive, negative, any of the comments in the report. Documents provided by the applicant have already been circulated. In some ways, do they completely need to be gone through? Thank you, because that would probably take a considerable amount of time. But nevertheless, anything that's said or today or been provided will be dealt with and considered later on. But yeah, going back to the housekeeping, the reason I comment is to make sure that there is some order here. No one is to speak over another person. If you wish to speak, you press the hand, this will light up and you wait your turn, okay? Many of us, I've been here before, I recognise quite a lot of faces from the initial application in this. So perhaps you will know the running order, but it is repeated in the first pages of the application, but simply the officer will read out the report. The members, the councillors will ask any clarifying questions from that officer. Then, in a normal environment, a responsible authority will read out their representations. You will note from, let me get the page, you can see it. Pages. You will note from page 5, there are no representations from responsible authorities in this matter. So we would then move on to the other representations. So effectively it's Mr. Phipps, positive or negative first? Negative, to get that out.
So yes, I think so. And I took it that that's how I read the procedure.
Yeah. So the opposing representations will then speak. The members will ask any questions. Chair, would you? No, we'll deal with it. And then positive representations. And then we move to the applicant, which I believe Mr. Phipps is going to speak solely, or are these persons, the sound engineers and like, going to answer anything, or are they just for backup, for want for a better term?
So yes, I think the plan is I'll speak, but obviously if the committee have questions, they may be better directed toward the individuals. And because you do the ability to dial in remotely, it seemed like a lost opportunity not to take advantage of it.
Absolutely. Then there'll be a discussion where the other parties can ask questions, but those questions are asked through the chair. It's not press your button and spurt it out, okay? Wait and take your time and take your turn. And then the applicant again will have the opportunity to summarise. And then at the conclusion, everyone will leave. The members will consider everything that has been heard, read, seen, and a decision will be given in 5 days. Okay, Chair?
So we start proceedings by going to the officer who will take us through the papers.
Thank you, Chair. I'll now read through the report of the Service Manager to the Statutory Licence Subcommittee. It's a licensing application to vary a premises licence. The premises is at Wobley Castle, Llanryddion, Swansea, and the applicant is Love Trials Festivals Limited. The application is to vary the premises licence, and this was received by the authority on the 11th of October 2024. The application proposes to increase the hours for late night refreshment on the following days: Thursday 2300 to midnight 30, and it's currently until midnight. Friday 2300 hours until 0300 hours, and it's currently 0200 hours. Saturday 2300 hours to 0300 hours, and it's currently 0200 hours. It's also to increase the capacity of the event from 4,000 to 4,999. Therefore, this would amend condition 10 to read: the number of persons permitted at the premises at any one time shall not exceed 4,999. And it's also to add a following condition, that a traffic management plan will be written and agreed in advance with Swansea Council and a subcontractor traffic management company. A redacted copy of the application is attached to Appendix A within the report, and that can be found on page 7 to 26. The premises does currently operate under a premises licence, and a copy of the existing premises licence is attached to Appendix B, which is from pages 27 to 35, and a copy of the existing plan is attached to Appendix B1, which is on page 36. Number 4, the background. The festival is a running event. This is a 4-day event which will take place on one occasion annually between Thursday and Monday during the months of May and October. A location plan is attached to Appendix C and C1, which also includes the licensed areas in blue, and this is on page 37 to 38. Number 5, promotion of the licensing objectives. The Licensing Act 2003 contains 4 licensing objectives, namely 1, the prevention of crime and disorder, 2, public safety, 3, prevention of public nuisance, 4, protection of children from harm. Number 6, relevant representations. There are no responsible authorities with relevant representations. However, there have been 7 received from other persons, and there has been 20 received in support of the application. Copies of these representations are attached to Appendix D, which is on pages 39 to 48 within the report, and copies of the representations in support are attached to Appendix D1, which is pages 49 to 59 of the report. Number 7, policy considerations. Considering this application, members should have regard to the current statement of licensing policy, which can be found at the following link, which was contained in the report. Number 8, guidance issued by the Home Secretary. Members should also have regard to the relevant part of the current statutory guidance issued by the Home Secretary in January 2024, in particular, 1, the introduction, Chapter 1, 2, licensing objectives, Chapter 2, 3, applications for premises licence, Chapter 8, 4, determining applications, Chapter 9, 5, conditions attached to the premises licence, Chapter 10, 6, statement of licensing policy, Chapter 14. A link to the guidance can be found within the report. Number 9, the determination of the application. The decision must be based on the individual merits of the application and the representations received, with a view to promoting the licensing objectives outlined in paragraph 5 of the report. In arriving at the decision, members should also have regard to the relevant provisions of the policy and the guidance as previously provided. Reasons must be provided for any departures from the policy or guidance. In reaching the decision, the committee must, having regard to its representations, take such steps mentioned below, if any, as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. A, grant the licence to conditions that reflect the operating schedule, modified to such extent that the authority considers appropriate for promotion of the licensing objectives. B, reject the whole or part of the application. Thank you, Chair. That concludes the reading of the report.
I'll take this opportunity to lay the lie of the land with this, really, and so that everyone's aware. This is not a review of the current license. This is an application to add what I would say 3 points to the application. Now, I often say this in the scenario of a late night refreshment amendment, variation, whichever, because sometimes people think that late night refreshment refers to supply of alcohol or extending the opening hours and things like that. Late night refreshment, if you opened a shop that sold hot food before 11 p.m. in the night, you don't need a license. After 11 p.m. until 5 a.m., you need a license to sell hot food, hot drinks, and not in relation to alcohol, okay? So this application is to extend, number 1, the late night refreshment, those 3 days, half an hour on a Thursday, 1 hour on a Friday, and 1 hour on a Saturday. Then the second point of this is to extend the capacity of the persons allowed to attend, currently 4,000, so extending it by 999. And then the third is to add a traffic management plan conditions effectively. So I say this, so the positive reps, the negative reps, or even the members' questions are directed to really those 3 points. This isn't about consumption of alcohol later on, sale of alcohol later on, or the opening hours of the event, because those are not going to be, well, unless something detrimental comes up and there's a need for a modification, those aren't what we're here for. Okay.
Okay, so at this point now, we ask if any of the committee have any questions for the officer in relation to what she's just read and what we've actually read in the last couple of days. Questions? Not at this point. Okay, so there are no questions. So now we go to
There are no responsible authorities. So it would be to the, if you like, the 7 objectors. May I take the opportunity, licensing officers, which of the 7 objectors are present and are going to be giving oral representations? I noted that. Was there?
Sorry, can I interrupt?
Yes.
You need to put the mics on because those online won't be able to hear you. Yes. Did you hear all that? Sorry.
Was there a husband and wife, Mr. and Mrs. Cowley, or was it Miss? P.S. One of you is going to speak on behalf of the other, and then online.
We have Sam Hughes. Oh, I can't. Is Sam Hughes joining us?
Was Mr. Davis and Claire Jones?
Yeah, got Claire Jones, Robert Davis, and there should be Leila Connolly and Sam Hughes, but I can't see that they're not.
Okay, well, we'll see if they come online when we get to the point and go from there. And then, was there a local community council? You're going to speak on behalf of the community council as well? There we are. Okay. Who's first on your list then? Ms. Thomas?
I'm quite disturbed by the application for an extension, being as the disruption and the noise nuisance that has occurred in the last few years. I run a CL, which I had to shut last year, lost 20 nights. This year I was told if I put it with the Love Trails personnel, that I would have bookings from attendees. That hasn't happened. I've had no inquiries. So basically, I have to shut. I had sound monitoring equipment at my premises last year's event. I was expecting to see a noise report with decibel levels recorded. The noise report that I received was just an overview from the festival organisers. There was no mention of decibel levels, so there was nothing to gauge the sound levels by. We were told that we wouldn't be able to understand the actual report. Well, you know, we're all of reasonable intelligence. I'm sure we would be able to understand readings. In the projected sound report in this paperwork, it mentions something of they're aiming at 90 decibel levels. Well, I may be wrong, but I thought the maximum was 70 decibels for amplified music. Now, I was told last year, one of the officers, the Swansea City Council officers, said the average decibel level in Gower is 20. So you can see that if you go from 20 to 90, it's quite a leap. Last year, I was disturbed on the Saturday evening quite a lot. But again, I have nothing to compare the decibel levels because I didn't have the decibel levels. And also on the Sunday evening at 7 o'clock, I could hear absolutely instructions for the races, and I am quite some distance away. I don't see the need. The only objection I have to the festival is the noise level. If the noise were to be toned down and I couldn't hear it or only in the distance, it would be fine. But that doesn't happen. And I do notice that the support has come, all the supporting representations have come mainly from attendees or persons with commercial interest. The residents seem to be taking quite a backseat. You know, I do feel we're ratepayers. We pay a lot of rates in Gower. And if this is the way that noise is to be managed, I feel the rates should reflect that. My point. Thank you.
Do you have any questions, lady? No. Okay. Who's next on the list, please?
Hi everyone. Such a shame that we're here again after being told by Love Child there would be no further applications, but there we are. Here we go. Couple of things. The amount of people that they now wish to have their extra 1,999, sorry, 999 people will inevitably cause further noise and will also affect the licensing objectives for crime and disorder and public safety. The link is well known between the drinking of alcohol, staying up late, partying, and things like crime. In England, where alcohol is thought to play a part in 1.2 million incidents, almost half of them are assaults, and that's the usual type of crime and incident that happens at festivals and that type of thing. Not in large numbers, I'm sure, but nevertheless. Also on Gower, we don't have a resident police force anymore. We used to, we don't now. We have one police officer who is in the locality but doesn't live there anymore. So that if there were to be an incident, that would cause a public safety issue and also safety for the festival goers, despite the fact that the festival has their own security to deal with some matters. The nature of movement between the campsites and the revellers going, either leaving, apparently 37% actually don't stay on site. Those people would be leaving at a later time should the licence be allowed later for food. And we do understand that it is not alcohol, because we can see that in the list, that it's only the alcohol. It's only the food element. However, I think probably we all are reasonable human beings. So when we go out and have a wedding or a party, we will have a drink, buy a few extra drinks at the bar when it's closing and stay, and then maybe have food, and then maybe the egress would be even later, causing a problem on the roads of young people walking back and forth to their wherever it is they're staying, and obviously some of them don't stay on site, so they would be going to Airbnbs. We've had a support letter from the King's Head, you know, which shows that lots of people stay there. That's a fair distance from where the festival is. Somebody would have to drive or get there in some way or form. There's more traffic on the roads at the middle of the night. The current licence, I think, is quite generous. Many places in the area who provide events are only permitted a licence till 1 AM, because and I'm talking about for everything now, not just for, I'm not talking about alcohol, I'm talking about for the food and for the openings. A further increase in numbers, the increase in numbers for this event will cause public safety as far as the roads are concerned. We already have a backlog of traffic on the days that people come in and go out. The one-way system that's put in place causes huge problems for business owners in the area, as well as residents and any visitors who want to come. In fact, visitors don't come now when the festival's on because they can't get in and they can't get out, and they have to go 6 miles round to get out where they might need to go just 500 yards. Farmers on Gower, ourselves included, we have a field just 500 yards from the bottom of our drive. We have to go 6 miles round to get to that field. You know, and this is to look after livestock. I mean, we have no objection to the Love Choice Festival for all the years since it started, both Viv and I supported it. In fact, we have never made a complaint until last year. Never, you know, because we felt that it's lovely that people can come to Gower. It's great that they can share what we have, this beautiful place that we live in. However, this year, the noise was just incredible. The disruption in the traffic was incredible. And the worry over people defecating in our fields, leaving rubbish in our fields. Just not one of our. There's a gentleman I believe online who's just listening, who had his car kicked, and somebody had their wing mirror broken by runners who felt that the cars got a bit too close to them. You know, we understand that it's a festival that people want to attend, and we don't want to stop it. Most of the people who are supporting all seem to think we want to stop it. We don't want to stop it. We just want it to be a reasonable thing that takes into account the problems that we have as well as residents, the public, and people trying to visit the area. Local businesses, as Diana said, have had to refund because they can't manage and they can't work during that period. And I understand totally that that is irrelevant to the committee. We appreciate and understand that the only things that are relevant to you are what comes within this licence. However, that must be said for Love Tries as well, because we keep on getting, every meeting we go to, we're told they cannot make a profit unless they have these numbers increased. Well, that should be irrelevant, as our losses of income are irrelevant. So, you know, I just want to make clear that that is an irrelevant point for us. I mean, we are not making a profit either. We're not working at all when you have your festival on. There's a couple of other things that I believe should be done, as with some others have said in their representations. We had this trial last year. You brought a company in, which was great, to do some noise monitoring so that we could all know, because it's quite difficult to assess noise. It's very objective. And you brought in a company to do that. You told us it cost you a lot of money and you brought a company to do that. There's a couple of questions I'd like to ask. I'd like to ask the chairperson if she could ask Love Tries firstly, is this the company, Jones and Ash, that have attended today? And if it is these are predictions, not based on levels. So can we have the levels so that we are able to make, and can the committee have the levels so that you may be able to make a proper judgment? And until I feel until those levels have been told to us, they did the monitoring last year, so they know what they are, they know where they were, they know where the problems were. Until those are done, then they shouldn't have any changes to the licence until they have put right the things that were asked for in the last one. And the initial application was rejected by the committee on lots of different grounds because so much was asked for. We knew they asked for a 4 AM alcohol licence then, and even though we're not discussing that now, we as residents and as a group feel that that's the thin end of a very big wedge. When it starts like that, it'll be every year there's an application for something a little bit longer, a little bit longer, a little bit longer. The biggest problem with the 3 AM foods, for me and for us especially, I suppose, because we live directly opposite the site. Our home is directly opposite where the site is. So inevitably there's going to be noise. And that's why for 5 years we've not complained. We inevitably knew there was going to be noise. What we didn't know is going to be the volume of noise that happens and what happens after people finish. We all know when you finish at something at 2 AM, you don't go to bed at 2 AM. You then, you know, finish up chatting, talking, chanting, singing, whatever it is you do. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the later this licence goes on, the more disturbed we are. We then have a 7 AM yoga starting with music that is just as loud as the previous night. I mean, this isn't just a day and nighttime thing. It continues all day, you know, every day for the 4 days. And we understand, and sometimes in the day it's okay, but when you're not getting any sleep in the night, then you have that in the day as well. You know, people running up your lane with boom boxes on their back, making a huge noise as well. What the Love Tries have done to engage the community is great. I'm glad that they've done that because they needed to do that. However, I do believe that was done because of the backlash from the last application. We had 27 objections then. People are happier that they didn't get the 3 and 4 AM licensing, and that's why there aren't as many perhaps this time. I just want to remind everybody that, you know, there are people involved in this as well, not just the business. I mean, lots of businesses a lot of businesses that work locally here are here all year round. We pay rates all year round. We manage our events all year round, so it helps and encourages people to come and spend their time and spend their money in Gower. And we understand that the Love Trials brings some of that money in, and lots of the support letters indicate that people do make money from it, and that's good. However, to add a further 999, sorry, and to increase to 3 a.m. I think will cause a further detrimental effect and does not support the licensing objectives. Thank you.
Can I just ask you, I'm a bit concerned because when you began by saying about the people that were supporting it, and you said that they lived locally. How, I've got to ask you how you know that, because we've got the same papers as you, and all the details have been redacted, so we don't know who's. Do you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, I should have clarified. There are 20 letters of support, but only 5 have put the names to them. So I know those 5. And the same with ours. There are 7, but only 5 have put their names to them. So that's how you know.
So the other 15.
Well, they could be people who go to the festival. We don't know who they are. So, you know, you can guesstimate, I suppose, but I don't know who those are. But I do know equally, it just sounds unequal, doesn't it? You know, 20, 24, 7 against, and yet actually only 5 of each had put their hands up and said, actually, I want to say this. You know, the others are not saying anything. They're supporting, but they're not prepared to say where they're from for that sport, so we can see if it is.
Yeah, we send notice of hearings out. So if we don't get a response to that, we automatically will redact it. And then we ask the question on the form whether people want their information redacted or not. And based on what is said,
So they do have a choice.
they do have a choice. But if they don't respond, we just redact the information.
I just want to.
But the forms do say that, don't they? If you redact, potentially they won't be taken into account because you've redacted.
Who's next, please?
Next on the list is Mr. Cowley, but Mrs. Pierce is also representing Mike Kenyon. So I didn't know if you want to, did you want to?
Sorry, Mr.
whether
Kenny
you want to
couldn't-
do it in the
couldn't come
room or
today.
whether you want to.
He says very similar things. Mr. Kenyon is also, can I just say?
Are you going to read out what he's already said?
No,
Right
you've
in
got that.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to read that. But what he asked me to make a point about was the noise, this document with the noise management strategy. He asked me to point out a similar point as Diane has made, that 20 to 30 is the average quiet area noise, which is what we've got on Gower. And that's, you know, to increase it increases 4-fold for every 5. Or that's what he's mentioned. So he asked me to say that, that's all. But other than that, he agrees with a lot of what we said.
Yeah. As you know, it was said by the officer in her opening, every application is on its own merits. Okay. And certainly if this was a completely new application, then those points are directly relevant. There is partial inference towards what you're saying for the extension of the hours for the food, because perhaps there is, I don't know how the electricity is supplied for those food establishments and things like that, so that might cause noise and further on. But then again, you don't know how much further that would ordinarily go into the night in any event. So, but the point I'm making is this is a application, in some ways a variation for those 3 points I made earlier, not in relation to some of the reasoning you've been putting forward.
Okay, so why are the noise people here then? There's no mention of noise in there in the application.
Well, the noise people aren't here from responsible other persons, are they? That's the applicant. They can bring who they wish. But we'll probably hear from them shortly. But Councillor Joy has just raised a hand.
Yes, Chair. I just wanted a question, a little bit of clarity. During your comments, you mentioned a figure of 37% of people don't stay on site. Is that a number that is recognised by others? I just wondered where that figure came from.
Came from your post event thing.
That's not been submitted in this application though, has it? Okay,
So that'll be disregarded.
yes. The members make the decision, as I said a couple of times in the opening, what's read, what's heard, what's seen. If there's additional information provided, there needs to be substance to it. And respectfully, that hasn't been provided. Okay.
Thank you.
We
I
hear your
understand.
point and everything else you've said as well. Okay. It will all be taken into consideration.
As long as that's the same for Love Tries, because they haven't provided us with the noise thing, monitoring thing.
Who's next?
Any of them?
Good morning, everybody. Basically, it's no point going over it all, reiterating what Lynn and Diane have said, but basically I concur with what they've said. But the main problem, as I see it with this event, I've got no problem with you holding the event at all, but the problem is noise. And the big problems comes from amplified sound. Now, we discussed this at length when we last met here, and I spoke to you personally afterwards as well. And I explained to you that the noise is the problem, and I was assured something would be done about it. Well, this hasn't been the case because Mr. and Mrs. Pierce had to get somebody out from the public health in Swansea who monitored the sound and then went, and I think you were asked to turn it down. Am I correct? And then the sound decreased. So I would suggest that if when this is going to, be looked at seriously, something has got to be done to do something about the noise problem, because that is what is really upsetting people more than anything else. And there's not really an awful lot more I can add to that. That is all. One other thing, that is also the view of the community council as well as my own personal view. Thank you.
I was asking regarding when effectively the local authority noise inspectors came out. I would assume during the last event. Is that what you've heard?
And you haven't had a report on that, no? Sorry. You haven't had a report, you've heard no more. And we haven't had a report on it either.
Jenny Azim came out and she did go down and ask them to turn down, and they did turn down a bit. And then we were told nothing else came of it then. We haven't.
Can I ask, what
Yeah.
time was that? Yeah, okay. Davis or Miss Jones?
No, so that's it. That's it for
They're not going to speak, are they?
therefore.
Okay.
Yeah, so opposed, that was it for opposed.
Mr. Phipps, that's correct, is it, that Mr. Jones and Mr. Davis are in relation to yourselves?
Yes.
So yes, I actually don't think Ms Jones is planning on speaking. She just wanted to observe, but I think Mr Davis does want to speak, but he's speaking for, not against.
Yes.
It's available, do we know?
Yeah.
And
or do you want to
see
do it?
in line with this?
So Rob Morgan would be next.
Mr Morgan, I understand is next. Thank you, Mr Morgan.
Hi, obviously I do not live locally to the festival, probably a few miles away, but I understand your concerns or whatever. But having attended the festival this year, I think it's just a great benefit to the Gower. Obviously, money is spread far and wide. Obviously, I'm a 5th generation farmer, obviously diversified, but obviously got the Rossilli sunflowers, which brings in a lot of tourism. So it was amazing to see so many Love Trails people down there. Having spoken to many of them, they've come from far and wide and had their eyes opened by Gower, whether it be running around, spending money in shops, spending money in restaurants. But yeah, I think the word festival gives it a bad name. It's more of a well-being thing, to be honest. The demographic of people there are there to have to get better, not get better, but to make themselves better, whether it's 500 people doing yoga on a beach, which is amazing in Broughton, or people running for the first time or doing a longer run. But the people I met there weren't your normal festival goers, drugs, drink, and everything like that. It was a different demographic, and there were a lot of hungry people there rather than thirsty people, if you ask me. But yeah, as for the, as I said, the money which is invested in obviously the local community is far and wide. I've spoken to campsite owners, restaurants, which has been fantastic. But yeah, having attended the festival, it was great. Loads of local people there. We had the free tickets, but it was a different festival in total. But it was nice to see even lots of farmers there enjoying themselves. It's a tough life being a farmer at the moment, but even obviously the festival is put on by farmers' fields, so they're having a much needed boost to their income, rather than obviously the traditional livestock on Gower, which is at the moment struggling. But it's an iconic event compared to most events, compared to Glastonbury and things like that. It'll never be that scale, but it's a totally different event, as in all the yoga, the motivational speakers, the running, and generally mixing with some very positive people rather than your normal festival goer. But all in all, people left that event promoting Gower, promoting Swansea, promoting the beaches, and just telling all their friends where to go, either on holiday or whatever. But yeah, it was plus points for me. But on the downside of things, I do see friends of mine over here, their views, and take that on board. No problem at all.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Who's next, please?
It's Claire Jones, but if she doesn't wish to speak, it would then be Robert Davis.
Mr. Davis, apologies. Are you there?
So, good morning, Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. And once again, thank you for the opportunity to address you. I would like to start by saying I am a resident of Old Walls, but I have no connection with the Love Trails organisation, and I've not received any incentive, financial or otherwise, to attend this hearing. And the views and opinions I express now are mine alone and are based on my personal experience of the festival in 2024. I paid to attend the venue. I had one of the tickets, which meant that a certain amount of the fee went to a charity, the Wales Air Ambulance. And I attended the festival at random times during the daytime. And I've since attended the post-event meeting for residents and corresponded with representatives of the Love Trails organisation. And in contrast to my representation to the committee last year, I'm broadly supportive of the Love Trails Festival and the proposed extension to the licensing of the event. Although I should say I reserve the right to adopt a completely different view with regard to any other licensed event occurring or planned for this part of Gower in the future. You might reasonably ask what then has changed my opinion of Love Trails. And basically it comes down to, I feel that they have been responsive to the concerns of local residents and can be welcomed again, provided that they adapt their site plan with regard to noise management and with regard to traffic management, which may not be such an important consideration for the committee at this time. Noise, as the report from the Joins Nash report, noise can be defined as unwanted sound, and it's clear that for many of the local residents last year there was a lot of noise, and noise is difficult to analyze and indeed measure, and it's not always understood that the decibel system is a logarithmic scale. It's not a linear scale, and it's not always widely understood what quiet means in terms of a rural and semi-rural location like Gower. Subjectively, Chairman, I would ask that the committee agree that it's reasonable for local residents to be able to sleep on a warm summer's evening with their bedroom windows open and not be disturbed, and also enjoy their gardens and patios without significant impact. I have read in detail the Joins Nash report, and it's clear that there are some changes proposed which could make could be of benefit to the perception of noise to local residents. But I charge them to deliver on the basis of the Love Trails organisation to deliver on the basis of the report from Joins Nash. Specifically, I'm very much mindful of my near neighbours, Lynn and Viv Pierce at Ocean View. So I think it's very particularly relevant that Joins Nash in their report, section 7, paragraph 2, are considering the relocation of what was called the Rhythm and Trails stage, which was located, if you look at document appendix B1, shows a map of the location of the event. And on that map, there's a location A04, which is the steeply sloping field from the roadway down past the Webley Castle farm down towards the marsh. And this was a location for a sound system which was directed uphill towards Ocean View without any baffling or system or means to attenuate the sound. I have to say that walking past that during the daytime when it was active was almost painful. And I see that Joins Nash have recommended or considered that should be relocated, and I think that that could make a difference. I have to say that I was not impacted personally by the other sound noise emanating from Webley last year, and but as I say, I think that the Love Trails Festival should be charged to deliver on their commitment to minimise the impact of noise on local residents. There are a number of points otherwise, Chair, where the Joins Nash report indicates that, for example, in section 7, section 11, the local authority are invited to attend, should they wish to do so, during the periods of checking sound levels before performance. They've also said that a complaints log will be monitored throughout the event, detailing addresses of complaints, times and actions. This report will be available to the local authority on request. That's section 14. And in section 16, following completion of the event, a report will be made available to the local authority. So this also, from me, Chairman, is a request to the council through the committee to take advantage of what is being offered in terms of sound monitoring, which together with Love Trails undertaking to provide a hotline, if you like to call it, for residents to call, a hotline which will be answered and the complaint, if any, dealt with promptly. I ask that the committee make sure that this actually happens. So basically, Chairman, I will complete my comments about noise at that point. I would only otherwise make a short comment about the management of traffic, and I think this is going to be a difficult situation for everyone to deal with, a situation that's not of Love Trails making because of the co-occurrence of the Ironman races on Sunday the 13th next year, when basically there will be a lot of people attending both events. There'll be, if it's a nice day, a lot of people wanting to get to the beaches of South Gower, and basically, as far as this resident is concerned, I expect to be staying at home or walking along paths rather than trying to drive anywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Who's next, please?
Joe Alistair. Joe Alistair.
Hello, hi everyone. So I'm a Llangennith resident. I run a local trail running group. I also run some charity running events around Thamatic Hill and near this festival site. I have done work. I work on a volunteer basis for Love Trails. I design the routes, the running routes, and I'm also in charge of speaking to residents, landowners, farmers, etc. So I feel like I've developed quite a good relationship with a lot of the Gower landowners, not just around the festival site, but we go across to Rosili, so met Rob through that, Portain and Horton, all around that, National Trust, all those landowners. And generally, I understand the concerns regarding noise and traffic, but from a point of the amount of runners out on route and behaviour on the trails, we have very positive feedback from a lot of the landowners, in terms of litter, gates being shut. I'm in charge of putting signs up, taking them down, and I feel like we do a good job. Obviously, sometimes things are missed because I have a team of people doing this. But on the whole, I think we do a very good job of leaving it as we found it. Very respectful to people who might not want us going on their land, even if it's right of way. So we try and avoid going through. If people object to it, we try and avoid routes. I try and avoid routes if possible. But I just want to say that it's a great event. Echo what Rob said. It brings in lots of people. I notice on my running group has increased by a lot of numbers the last couple of years. Both the running club and the charity events I do, which is for Air Ambulance Wales as well. But yeah, appreciate the concerns. So I'm just coming from the side of the amount of traffic out on the trails, and I don't foresee an issue with safety in terms of the extra numbers. Thank you.
All the representations have now spoken.
So we come to the applicant now.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Sorry, does the gentleman want to speak? I don't want to talk over him.
Gentleman, Mr. Lewis, one of the local councillors, Mr. Lewis, Councillor Lewis, sorry, had not made a formal representation and sought to make reps to the committee. We were sympathetic to Mr. Lewis's cause to make representations, but as the nod from Mr. Phipps, essentially, if embarrassingly to say, if someone hasn't made a representation in writing, the regs say that we can't allow a person to make the rep themselves. The understanding was that the comments or the not support for the application, the opposition to the application was voiced through the words of the other persons. You happy with that, Mr. You'll have to put your
say is about the noise. And indeed, we have a number of caravan sites throughout Gower, and they are controlled extremely successfully.
I'm sorry, Councillor Lewis, you're not going to be able to.
Chairman, that's fine.
Okay, Mr. Phipps, we're over to you. Thank you.
Just to deal with Councillor Lewis' point, if effectively the view is Councillor Lewis supports that which has been said by the objectors, I don't have any objection to that, but I just think developing it's probably a bit strong. Thank you, Chair. So in terms of my presentation to you this morning, I do take the steer from your legal officer, who has told me courteously, but I think fairly firmly, not to go through everything line by line, which I'm not going to be doing. But there are a couple of things I would like to do, if I may. The first is I did some written submissions that were in the materials that were sent through to you. I don't have a paginated set of the second material, so I don't know what number page that's on for you. It was in effectively the cover email that you've got. But if the licensing officer's got that, I could just tell you the page number, then I can canter you through that document, please. I think it's the thing, yes, Lindsay, I think it's that top document. It's the block of text document. Yes, the letter. Would you, is that the first page for the committee? It's the first page. It's a block of text. I'm going to just canter you through it, if I may, committee. I'm not going to be giving you paragraph numbers and so forth, but I'll just take you through the points that are in that, if I may, and then I'll just refer to the other documents briefly. So you've heard a lot about Love Trails. The first point really I would make is to tell you that it is a significant success. Appreciate not for everybody, but it is a significant success in terms of the development of a new event from 2017 with COVID interrupting it as well. And it is also successful in the context of the licensing objectives. And we are not embarrassed to say that. We say that very firmly, and I'll come on to those points in due course. We provided some supporting materials. I'll take you through those briefly in due course, but a presentation document that gives you a bit of background. I appreciate not all the points are on the issue of the licensing objectives, but I'm going to take you through that in due course. An index to the event management plan, which is the materials that go into all of the risk assessment for putting on an event of this sort. And what I say unashamedly about the index alone will give you a sense of the professionalism, expertise and experience that's being brought to bear here. Simply the list of all the policies says something. And that, of course, goes not only to the responsible authorities, but your safety advisory group, who are engaged in the planning, dialogue and discussion that precedes all of this event. And the safety advisory group is not just the responsible authorities, police, fire, environmental health, etc. It's all of the other services that you'd expect that would be engaged in a large-scale event. So it's the ambulance service, it's highways, and so forth. There's also a noise management plan that has been produced by Joins Nash, who you will see from the introductory pages are expert in their field. And in terms of noise, I'll return to this point, but it is new for us to have appointed a professional expert acoustic consultant. You heard a number of points about noise made by a number of the attendees. We do not fail to recognise the responsibility we have to deliver an event that does not cause public nuisance. I can't tell you that we will have no impact whatsoever. I can't tell you that no one will ever know we're there, but I can tell you that we will do our level best to ensure that everything is minimised to a level that you're satisfied. And I think the phrase that was used by Mr. Davis, he would charge us to deliver, I think was the phrase that he used. And that's a challenge that we accept, that we recognise, and I hope, and again, the Joins Nash report I will canter through, but that the report sets out that we've understood that before we came here today, that it is something we need to stay on top of. There's also a traffic management plan. Brief details also set out in the presentation slides. The traffic management is a challenge. You will all know the Gower as well as anyone, and it is fair to say that there are pinch points. The arrival window, the departure window particularly. We have done our best to develop this. One thing that and it's a conversation for another day, but we do have a sort of resident pass system where if you are a local resident, you can use the roads on a pass system, something that we need to engage with Mr. and Mrs. Pearce on, as it sounds as though they're not familiar with it, and something we need to pick up in passing. But what I do say about the traffic management is, first of all, I don't accept the public safety licensing objective can fairly be said to be undermined. A number of the representations say, well, there might be another 185 cars as a result of the increased capacity. It's a national British road. 185 cars, I'm afraid, over a 4-day period arriving and departing is not a public safety licensing objective. And were it, you'd expect the police or highways to be here and to have told you as much. And so, respectfully, I can't accept it's a public safety concern of any legitimacy at all. It could be aggravating then. I mean, I entirely accept that. But is it a public nuisance having a pinch point on arrival and departure in counterbalance to the event and activities that take place? And we say no, that the balance is not fairly struck to say that the event needs to have its capacity Sorry,
Mr. Phipps, you're in full flow. If you say that though, why is, I call it the third condition, obviously late night refreshment increase, but the third condition you see is a traffic management plan.
yeah, absolutely. And that arose from the dialogue with the police that preceded the submission of the application. And they effectively said, we need you to have a traffic management plan. And what I'm saying is, with a traffic management plan, there's not a public safety problem. Sorry, I'm not saying if we didn't manage it at all, it couldn't be a problem. Of course, if we took no responsibility for it at all, it would be a problem. But what I say is that it's fairly balanced by our taking responsibility with a traffic management plan. Just over on the second page, the hours of operation are not changing. And as your solicitors kindly pointed out, the alcohol hours are not changing. There will be more people on site if you're minded to grant the variation. So more people will be consuming alcohol. I accept that, but I don't accept the suggestion from Mrs. Pearce that that inevitably will cause antisocial behaviour or difficulties. You've heard a little bit from Rob about the nature, type and style of the attendees. Fundamentally, the philosophy of this event is a festival that is predicated on those who want to trail run. That needs, I'd suggest, that tells you something about how they're going to conduct themselves, what they're going to be like, and how they'll be behaved. So we don't accept the mere existence of more people it would lead to antisocial behaviour. And I'm bound to say again, if that was the case, you'd expect the police to be here. The police are not here, nor are any of the other responsible authorities. We undertook pre-application consultation with all of the officers. That's where the traffic management condition came from the dialogue with the police. You'll see some commentary from me here, but the police attended the event last year. And on the issue of officer attendance, environmental health officers attended, that's right, every day. They came along every day. They were monitoring and supervising. They would come and check, as they do all of your large-scale events, as you would expect at all large-scale events within the city. And that the officers have not served a representation in respect of noise, I say, tells you all you need to know about whether there was a public nuisance last year. There wasn't. If there was, the officers would be here. But we have stepped up our approach to noise nuisance. And that is why we've engaged Jones Nash. Last year we had monitoring equipment, but we monitored that with our sound team. We didn't have a professional acoustic consultant. That's what we've got proposed going forward. We've undertaken significant engagement with the residential community. I know there's a couple of slightly sharp comments about whether we're just doing it for the appearance sake, but I just would reference meeting on the 7th of July, emails, newsletters, an email list, a post-event roundup, a further engagement about the forthcoming, as is now, variation application with notices around and about. We do take the engagement very seriously. One of the criticisms last year is that the hotline wasn't as well monitored as it should have been. That's a point we've taken on, and I'll pick that up when I come to the noise management plan. We're not perfect, and we are not here to tell you we're perfect. And I've set that out on the bottom of the second page of the submissions. In the engagement we've had from residents, they've asked us about things like dogs being on leads, not running freely, hedge cutting, needing to be something we need to think about with the farmers so that there's better lines of visibility down the road, and increase the number of running marshals, something we recognise. The point that was made about the announcements for yoga, 7 in the morning, being too loud and disturbing, are fairly made good points. Customer are expected to conduct themselves in a certain way, and we have a customer code of conduct. We're going to increase signage, increase the number of marshals, and the monitoring is now effectively extremely professional. So we haven't shied away from the fact that we have improvements to make, as candidly all events do. But I would ask you to look at that list and just give some consideration to how many of those can fairly be said to really attach to the licensing objectives. The objectives you've heard from, and not for me to make any comment. The only thing I would say, the only query that we have is I'm just not sure about the 37% figure. Now, it may be that I'm not as close to the event as I should be, but you get a camping ticket within your ticket. So I think that the number of people who depart is a much smaller number, but it perhaps isn't the most significant point. Dealing with the representations in support, I put 19 in my note to you because actually the 20th only came through, I think, after I'd first written it, but it's 3 times the number of objectors, just about. And I would ask you to look at it. I entirely accept a lot of them are associated with the event. A lot of them may be said to have a financial vested interest, such as people who are arranging the trails and engaging with the farmers and so forth. They may be commercial premises who've benefited by having a trail run past their pub or shop so that people may have stopped and bought a drink. I accept that. And if that's said to diminish the representation, to say, oh, well, they're not really valid because they may have a vested interest, so be it. But I would ask you to read them. And I entirely accept the point that Councillor makes, that it's impossible to know precisely where people live because the details are redacted for you as they are for us. But actually, the representations give you a steer, a fairly open steer, that you're not getting letters from the Outer Hebrides here. And candidly, how would they have known the applications being made in any event? The DPS is here. Michael is online, introduced himself to you earlier. Just in terms of alcohol, I do appreciate the point that's made that this is not an alcohol application, but alcohol would probably be, or I think the phrase normal circumstances or something was used. So let's attend to the issue of alcohol. Michael has been the DPS at Green Man Festival for many years. He's been involved in alcohol service and delivery for many years. It's in the presentation. There's a specific slide about him and what he does. And in the license conditions, there are specific conditions about training, pre-service, brief, refusals book, challenge 21, and so forth. And no one, as far as I can see at all, has suggested that there was anything other than a really high standard of delivery and management of alcohol to the customers last year or indeed in other years. There's some sections about the national guidance that I've included. Appreciate your licensing officer reference that. The one that I would just respectfully remind your legal officer of is paragraph 9.12, the national guidance, which is the one thing I will read today. Each responsible authority will be an expert in their respective field, and in some cases it is likely that a particular responsible authority will be the licensing authority's main source of advice in relation to a particular licensing objectives. For example, the police have a key role in managing the nighttime economy, should have good working relationships with those working in the local area. The police should usually therefore be the licensing authority's main source of advice on matters relating to the promotion of the crime and disorder licensing objective. And the paragraph is longer than that, actually, but effectively the point that's made, I make equally for the environmental health position, which is that they have not seen fit to object to this application, either knowing full well absent an objection to be granted under delegated authority. Your own licensing policy, I am not here to patronise the committee or indeed Democratic Service of the licensing team, but a couple of paragraphs of particular significance from your own policy that I'll just refer to. In the introduction, there's significant reference to the local economy, attraction of tourists and visitors, keeping areas and communities vibrant, providing employment opportunities and so forth. So it isn't right to ignore the economic impact. It may not be a point that in any way is conclusive, but it's not an inappropriate point to be referenced. The need to encourage and promote live music, the liaison with police and highways, and you'll note highways, of course, not here, have regard to the needs of local tourist economy, employment situation. All of those points, we say, over the course of one weekend, are very much in our favour. If we were asking to conduct these activities on 365 days a year at this location, I would be entirely understanding that would not sit well. But I would invite the committee to remember it is one weekend a year. Couple of comments just about each application on its individual merits, which your legal officers kindly already mentioned. Just the point about risk. I cannot sit here and tell you that there is no risk associated with the grant of this license. That would just be false nonsense from any solicitor. But that is true of every single application that ever comes in front of you for a variation or a new application. If risk, the existence of risk and anxiety, which predominantly the objections are focused on, predominantly they say, oh, we don't want this extra step, we don't want this extra part. If you were to choose to refuse every application based on risk, there would be no pubs. Nobody would be able to open a pub because there would be alcohol and there would be a risk of poor behaviour and difficulty. So looking at how we have done, looking at how we have approached the application, looking at our operating schedule, looking at what the officers say, we say allows you to balance that risk. And balance and proportionality are keywords within both the policy and the guidance, which we say unashamedly fall in our favour. Just in terms of the presentation, I've touched on it and you will all have had a chance to see it, but there is some detail about the individuals who are in front of you today, Sarah, Theo and Michael. There's some issues that attend to the points about residents that I have made and the engagement with residents June, July, August, September, October of this year. And it isn't done for the sake of it. It's done to take everybody with us and to engage properly. There's detail about the traffic management summary. There's detail about our sustainable policies, which includes travel. There's detail about our sound management policies, environmental and sustainable issues, which hopefully are of some help to the committee. I've dealt with the event management plan index, but the mere fact that there's 47 policies contained within that document, which is a couple of A4 ring binders or whatever, I hope says something positive. In terms of the Jones Nash acoustic consultants, I'll just pick up 2 points really, if I may. One is that there is proposed to be off-site monitoring that is attended to by Jones Nash, who would effectively look to ensure that there is no public nuisance off-site. That will be done entirely transparently with environmental health, and Bob can talk to this if you'd like. But what tends to happen is the environmental health and the acoustic consultants stand next to each other as they patrol the perimeter of the site in order to check that the levels are correct and check that they're getting the same readings and so forth. There is a complaints protocol and procedure, which a couple of the representations say wasn't perfect last year, which we're entirely respectful of that criticism. And that is something that anybody who has an issue can dial into. Then the consultants can attend the site and they are in communications with the site in order to make amendments and or improvements, turn it down, on site if that is necessary. And then finally, there's the traffic management plan. It's an overview document, but even across the 11 sides of A4, 13 sides of A4 that I think are in front of you, I hope you can see that there is the makings of a strong, robust plan in order to ensure that we minimize impact. And as I touched on before, I can't offer to eradicate impact. No application, no large-scale event possibly can. But we can tell you that we are trying to do our best. The final point then is just to touch on last year's application. I get the point, each application on its individual merits, and we're in front of you today on today's application. But my take on that, if I may say, is twofold. The first is that if the committee sat on last year's application, the police and the environmental health, from memory, certainly officers, expressed concern about last year's application. I, having reread those representations, fairly recently. I take those now to say you need another year under your belt. We're not there yet. You're being a bit greedy. And there was later hours were applied for them this time and so forth. And that the officers are not here now must tell you something very significant. And to an extent, Mr. Davis, really, you can rely on Mr. Davis's comments for that rather than for me. And like Mr. Davis, there is no reason to think these officers won't be monitoring us pretty carefully. We are not going to disappear. We are hiding in very much in plain sight. And if it isn't the environmental health officer or the police, all of whom attended, I suspect it's fair to say that Mr. Davis will be keeping a fairly careful eye on us next year in any event. And the second point is just the inversion of objections to support. 3 times the volume of supporters this time to objectors, and only a third of the objectors who objected last time maintain an objection. And so I do ask you to bear that in mind. It does rather corroborate, I hope, the points we've made. That's all from us, but you may have some questions.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Hi. My first question, given is centered around the fact that, of course, you're talking about 1,000 more people attending this festival, and I'm looking at the trail runs. Are the trail runs going to be from the site itself, or is there traffic movement in order to get people to trail runs?
I can answer that one. They all take place from the site itself and leave on the footpaths that intersect the site.
That's great. Thank you.
Do you have another question? No?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. My second question was to do with the interaction that you have with the Ironman, which we know is on the Saturday, for example, where the cyclists from Ironman are going to be up fairly close to, but not as far as your site. If there were traffic movement from your site, perhaps festival goers who want to move on and off the site, is that going to be specifically addressed in the traffic management plan? Have you considered it at this stage?
I mean, I think the simple answer is yes to both. There's more work to be done in the intervening 7 months, and we need to engage with Ironman, and they will need to engage with us, as you would expect. But yes is the simple answer to both elements.
I'm just a bit concerned that the neighbours, well, neighbours I'm saying, but some of them are concerned about the noise levels, and I'm just wondering. I've read what you put forward, but have you got anything in mind? Should you get a complaint? Because obviously you've got a nice working relationship with the neighbours, whereby if they find it a little bit too heavy, they come to you and say, is there anything we could do about this, rather than make it known to the authority? Is there anything?
Absolutely. So that is set out in the noise management plan, and Bob is here, and perhaps you may want to hear from him rather than from me. But absolutely. So what will happen is this. First of all, there will be, whether it's a hotline, a complaints line, whatever you want to call it. I think it's right that last year it was an email rather than a mobile, but there will be effectively mobile contact. I live at this address. It's too noisy. Whereupon the noise management company, or indeed the management company, will go to the site, do the assessment. If the environmental health officer are there, they'll be doing that with environmental health. Not because the residents run environmental health, because we'll be engaged in a dialogue with them at the time. They're not there all the time, so that may not happen. And then we will make corrective measures to bring it down in the event that that's the case. And that, candidly, councillor, that's not, if you will, particular to this site. That's particular to Joins Nash, because I do know Bob and I know their business. That's how they operate for other events outside of Swansea. Get to the site, find out what the levels are, and then go effectively back in contact with the source of the site, the stage, and the sound engineer on the stage, and get it addressed. Well, it's a tiny point, but just when we were talking earlier about numbers, 90 dB was mentioned. That's right. That's at the stage itself. That's not at the receptor point where the resident would live, for what it's worth.
That's fine. Thank you. That's quite encouraging to hear that, to be honest. Do you have any more questions?
With the noise management plan, has that then taken into consideration the comments from last year? I.e., is it trying to improve the situation? Hopefully lessen the noise impact and address the concerns that the residents have had?
Yes, it's the simple answer, Councillor, but it's stronger than that. The appointment of Joins Nash in and of itself as an expert acoustic consultant arose in order to make sure that we were properly on top of it. We didn't have them engaged last year. We've got them now because we know that we've listened to what's been said and we knew we needed to up our game in that regard.
Okay, we don't seem to have any more questions, so we'll throw it open and see if you have any questions as the opposition. Yes?
Yes, please.
So
Miss Thomas, is it? Please.
I'd like to go back on a few points. Nobody's mentioned Glastonbury this year, but I've since found out that Glastonbury pay local residents that are affected. They pay them in effect enough money to go away out of the area.
No, sorry, that's incorrect. I know the Glastonbury
I had campers on my site who clarified that. They're actually
can I interrupt simply? Points of clarification now.
Okay.
Stuff relevant to this committee, this application, and these licensing objectives. And not points you've already made.
Okay, now you mentioned that it was only for one weekend per year. It's not actually for the residents because Webley hold quite a lot of events. Another one, a big one, is on August bank holiday, again for 4 days. There was another camping event, which, it messes up everything. There's quite a few weekends, probably about 7 weekends this year.
You're talking about other events. This is on its own merits.
It's relevant. Sorry, I find it irrelevant that the gentleman said is only for one event. It's not. Webley
You
hold
can't
lots of
tar
events.
this event with a different events brush. Okay, they have applied to increase numbers, to increase food time, and to add a management plan.
Well, also on the noise consultant, you said you've engaged a noise consultant. Well, if there was no issue, why have you engaged one? The noise report I notice on the agenda as well with all these policies is quite towards the bottom of the list. It's like number 45 or something. There are still signs, actually, Mr McAllister there's still signs at Llanryddion Woods already from this year. They're still there, so not all collected. And the complaints telephone number was not answered. And Mr. Cowley, I don't know if Mr. Cowley's going to say, but he does represent quite a lot of villagers. So although there are only 7 representations on the face of it, actually a lot of people have gone through the community council. Okay.
Just dealing with those points, we've engaged noise acoustic consult because we recognised that we needed to up our game and improve how we deliver to that. That's what we've done. So I've never said that we were perfect. What I have said is we don't cause a public nuisance. We don't undermine the licensing objectives. And I say that the environmental health officer clearly corroborates that because he visited, as you know, and as you said, and he hasn't seen fit to say anything wrong with the application. The complaints not being answered, we're sorry about that. And that was touched on in our debrief document. And again, we recognise we didn't get everything right. That's why it's specifically set out in the noise management plan. That's why we're upping our game in that regard. The signage, I'm sorry, I didn't know about the signage. You're very welcome to have told us about tell us or have told us about the signage. We'll get it removed straight away. And if afterwards we can have a chat about that, we will get that attended to straight away. We haven't known that in the intervening 5 months or 4 months since the event. We had no intention to leave a sign on a gate or on a fence. And if that has been left there, then I apologise.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, we've listened to what you said, and a lot of it is very relevant and sounds good, and the management plan for your noise strategy sounds great. So with that in mind, and the fact that there were so much bother last year, wouldn't you consider then that it's best to leave your license as stands at the moment for this year, put this plan in place, and as Rob Davies says, deliver, show us that you can reduce the noise without increasing numbers, and then that would give you far more support from people like us, because you will have proven the point prior.
No, no point dancing around it, and no, straight question deserves a straight answer. No, we did not undermine the licensing objectives last year. We delivered a really compelling, impressive, good, successful event. Not for, I accept, absolutely everybody, and therefore we need to improve, and that's why we're attending to the improvements and considering. That's why we've had a significant debrief. That's why we've taken on all of the feedback that we've had. That's why we're straining every sinew to get it right. But candidly, Councillor, for large-scale events, if you waited for every large-scale event to be flawless so that every resident said this is the most marvellous thing and I fully support it, there'd never be a variation application for an event of this sort. It is, I'm afraid, something that needs to be looked at, obviously by committee, but objectively. And we say, which we are at loggerheads on, we delivered a cracking event and the licensing objectives were not undermined. We may have had some impact, and we need to alleviate that impact wherever we can, as much as possible for all of you. But I'm afraid residents support this application. Some do not. And that is not a basis on which we withdraw an application and wait to come back in another year.
As mentioned earlier, we don't know which residents support it. We only have a few of your 20. There's only 5 that have put their names, so we don't know that those are residents, even though you're just saying that they are residents.
Yes, that's right. So if we just take it as the 5, and then the committee will have the chance to read the other representations, and they'll be able to determine whether they consider the person may live locally or may not. I entirely accept that. But to be clear, we do not accept that that there is a groundswell of residential community objection to this application. We say the community supports the event and the application.
I'd just like to go back to this this point about the number of people who supported it. Now, as the community council, we have objected to it. And to go back to this business about noise, I mean, I can't understand after last year's conversation, you haven't really covered yourselves in glory, because obviously they didn't take heed as to what we said, and you have upset people with the noise levels, and I cannot for the life of me understand why you want it quite so loud. Now, when I spoke to this committee, whether it's last year or the year before, I brought up that the morning after one of your events, I went down to the nursery down in Skirlage, and the girls down there said to me, where did all that racket come from last night? Now, that's the prevailing wind comes from the west. So if that sound carried that far down there, why on earth do you need to have it so loud? And if you want, peace and tranquility in the future, surely the answer is quite simple. You reduce the noise levels.
Thank you. But to take your last point first, Councillor, this application is not about peace and tranquility. We cannot offer you peace and tranquility, and I'm afraid that the Licensing Act is not interested, nor does it engage in peace and tranquility.
I beg your pardon.
It's about public nuisance. And what we say is that there is no public nuisance at this event, nor will there be moving forward. At the peace and tranquility point, I do respect the fact that for a number of the objectors, the peace and tranquility of the Gower late at night is a point of significance. But I'm afraid peace and tranquility is not what the Licensing Act is engaged in. And I'm afraid that, and forgive me for this, but the very fact that you're referencing a dialogue you had with the girls in Skirlage 2 years ago tells perhaps the committee something about how successful our event was this year just gone by.
Sorry.
That's a fair point. Let's be very clear about this. Through you, Chair, we are entirely committed to delivering an event that everyone considers successful. That not everyone considers it successful today, self-evidently, it does not, I'm afraid, cause us to say, well, we'll come back again on another day. One doesn't always find that for large-scale events, one can always satisfy everyone all of the time, but we are doing our best to do that. That's why we are engaging. That's why we've instructed noise consultants. That's why we've got a traffic management plan. That's why we've held meetings. That's why we've done the newsletters and so forth. So we are doing our best, and we hope that you, in a year's time, will say, fantastic, thank you. But I appreciate you don't say that today, but that's why we're in front of a committee.
That's exactly the purpose of the Licensing Act and why you are all here. So, I think, yes, perhaps move to Mr. Phipps. Are you going to sum up anything further, or?
Yeah, this is a good application. It's less than was first applied for when there were more objections and more concerns. The event has drawn breath and thought, okay, what would make this a better event? And we say this is a better proposal. And we do say unashamedly that all the responsible authorities agree, and that is a point of very real significance. It's supported by the fact that a third of the number of objectors now still object. And it would appear, albeit a matter for your interpretation having read them, that there are a decent number of people who live in the vicinity and community who are supportive, whatever that number might later be redacted or not. And when one looks at what we are applying for, and I do ask you to look at what we're applying for, I just will run you through it. To have a traffic management plan. I don't think anybody's suggesting that shouldn't be granted. Or it would be an unusual request for that not to be attached as a condition, because it arose from our dialogue with the police prior to the submission of the application, who said that that was something that they wanted to see us develop. So I won't address you any more on that. Additional food within the hours of operation of the premises, half an hour on Thursday, an hour Friday and Saturday. I am candidly struggling to address you on how that may fairly be said to undermine the licensing objectives. I appreciate the objectors have put their best foot forward on that, but we don't accept the point. Someone might buy a pint at 5 to 2, and then they may go and have a curry and sit on a bale of hay with their mates before they plan their day for tomorrow. I accept that, but that doesn't adversely impact the licensing objectives. That's not what we are really here to refuse, I would suggest. And you know, we all in life have a few drinks, have a dance, and have a bite to eat at the end of the night before we go home. And whether it's a bag of chips, a kebab, a curry, whatever it might be on site. And it might be a bowl of pasta, so you get some carbs on board before you do a 10-mile run the following morning, which as you will see, I'm no trail runner, but you know, that's a thing. And so we don't see that can fairly possibly be said to undermine the licensing objectives. The increase to capacity can fairly be said to be a point of concern that merits your consideration. And what we say about that is that in the circumstances of all our plans, our proposals, the documents that you've got in front of us, the conditions on our license, the experience that you have of the previous years, capacity in and of itself can't be fairly said to undermine the licensing objectives. We need to get them onto site quickly with the least impact possible and we need to get them off site at the end of the event with the least impact possible. That's a challenge that we need to rise to, and we recognise that. Traffic management touches on that. We need to make sure they're well behaved on site. Entirely recognise that. Alcohol, nobody's really suggesting that this is a troublesome event. You've got Rob's comments about what the attendees were actually like. The health and fitness, yoga at 7:30, the announcements can legitimately be something that level a criticism at us about, and we need to sort that out. But the very fact there's 500 people doing yoga at 7 in the morning probably tells you something about what the customer profile at the event is like. So alcohol abuse, antisocial behavior, poor behavior doesn't seem to be a legitimate criticism. And then we've got some things we need to make sure we're on top of. There's a sign or signs that have been left on a hedge or on a fence or on a gate for a couple of months. We haven't known about it, but we need to attend to it. We need to make sure dogs are on leads. We need to make sure that the runners aren't creating a noise and disturbance by having unnecessary music as they run through the streets and lanes. We need to make sure we have a decent litter patrol. But these are not reasons, respectfully, to refuse an application. We say this is a perfectly good application to grant.
Thank you all for attending this morning. We're going to go into recess now, and you'll have notification within 5 working days. Thank you, everyone. Have you gone myself now?